Welcome, everybody. It's Christine Parakis, and we are back at the Career Invincibility Radio Show. I am super excited and been waiting for this show to come. John Livesay, who's the Pitch Whisperer, is a sales keynote speaker, happens to be my personal friend, as I count him among my friends, and he shares lessons he learned from his award-winning sales career at Conde Nast in his keynote, Better Selling Through Storytelling, and also available on his book. And he teaches company sales teams to become irresistible so they're magnetic to their ideal clients. And who can't use that? John turns sales teams into revenue rock stars by showing them how to form an emotional connection and a compelling sales story with clients. His TEDx talk, Be the Lifeguard of Your Own Life, has over 1 million views. And his book is a bestseller, Better Selling Through Storytelling. He's the host of the Successful Pitch podcast, which is heard in over 60 countries, and these interviews make him a sales keynote speaker with fresh and relevant content. People love him because they know he's been in their shoes. John's been interviewed by Larry King and appeared on TV as an expert on how to ask for what you want and get a yes. He lives in Austin with his Pepe, his King Charles Spaniel, who welcomes him home after a keynote speech, reminding him of the importance of belly rubs. And those of us who are his friends, we love Pepe. Welcome, John. Thanks for being here today.
Thanks, Christine. Wonderful to be with you.
Yeah, I'm super excited. You have so much going on. Where do we start? Let's talk about how to turn case studies into case stories.
Okay, let's dive right in it. Well, the concept of a case study has been around forever. It's what salespeople typically do when they're trying to get a client. They go, here's some of our other clients, here's a case study. Even the word study sounds like homework and boring to me, and it's usually just a bunch of facts and figures, and there's no story to it. So I talk to people about how to turn these boring, static case studies into compelling case stories, because whoever tells the best story is the one that's memorable and gets the yes. So many times after a salesperson speaks, and we all have to sell ourselves all the time, people forget what we say, and it's because we haven't told a story. So I can get into an example of a case story, and I can tell you what makes a good one. You tell me where we should go from there.
Well, I'd like to hear a little bit about your story. It's one of the things that we focus on here at Career Invincibility is, how do people get to like the heights of success that you've achieved and are on continued success that you have? I know it's not a straight line, and we'd like to hear how you've done it and what can be in that for us.
Sure. Well, I was having a very successful sales career at Conde Nast, selling advertising for magazines and brands like GQ and Wired and W and Vanity Fair, etc. And then 2008 hit, and it was, mortgage crisis, and all the luxury advertising plummeted with it. And so I got laid off along with all the other reps in outside of New York offices and 30% of the New York staff. And that was, since your show is about career being vulnerable in your career, that was certainly invincible. Yes, how can we be invincible in our careers? But, we all have moments when we don't feel invincible. And certainly getting laid off, I did not feel invincible. I had to be out of the office in 24 hours after being there for 15 years. And I, asked one question, Christine, that really impacted my future, which was, well, don't you want a status report of where these ads should run and which issue, what page number? And the publisher said, well, that would be great, but everyone else is so angry, they're just storming out. And I thought, I've known these clients for 15 years, watched them get married, have kids. I'm not going to do that. And that one decision really impacted me, even though I felt like I'd been kicked in the gut and, felt scared and sad. And I thought, wait a minute, I've lost my job, but not my identity. I still left that status report. And then I had to reinvent myself from just selling print ads to learning how to sell digital. And a good friend of mine had said, it's kind of like silent movie actors. Some of it made it to talkies and some didn't. And so you have to decide if you're going to be one of those people that can learn new skills. So I did, and I learned, I got a job at the Daily Beast selling digital ads. And then Conde Nast called me back 2 years later and asked me to come back to my old job, which then required digital skills. So I wouldn't even have been qualified to do my old job had I not gotten that experience. And I thought to myself, if I'm coming back, I'm not coming back with any fear. Because I lived in fear of the magazine going out of business, me getting fired, not making my numbers. I thought, I've already been laid off, and I figured out how to survive, and so I'm not going to have that fear of that happening again. And when I came back with that attitude, it gave me the freedom to think of ideas outside the box, no matter how crazy they were, and ended up doing a joint promotion with Guess Jeans on their anniversary and the magazine's anniversary that resulted in a lot of revenue, and winning salesperson of the year for the entire company, not just my brand. And that was my big aha moment of, I'm the same person, whether I'm getting laid off or winning this award. So that's what has led me to realize my bigger mission in life is not just helping people tell better stories, but the story we tell ourselves, that who we are is bigger than any one thing happening to us. And certainly our self-esteem doesn't have to go on a roller coaster of what's going on the outside to determine how we feel about ourselves.
Wow, that is powerful stuff, John. And I can't think of a better timing to hear your message, right? Because we're still now fast forward to the current time. And when this show is airing, going live, we're talking about a global pandemic and economic distress and health anxiety and all the things that are going on right now. Many people are feeling either they've been laid off or furloughed, or their businesses have to pivot. So we're all in the same place you were in that first time you got, gut punched. And we can take so much from this story. And I guess what would change to your advice to people today going through this global pandemic together?
Well, it's funny because I turned my story into my TEDx talk, Be the Lifeguard of Your Own Life. And I would say that aspect has not changed. Instead of, in a hurricane, sometimes people don't evacuate and they send in a helicopter to save you. But we have to be our own lifeguards. And whether we're in a pandemic or just a recession, and realize there's always opportunity that comes along with change, even if it's not a change we want. So, for example, being a speaker, I was constantly traveling and giving talks in person, and now that's not happening. So it became a virtual situation. But then my clients were saying to me, can you also train our team on how to look and sound good on Zoom? They've never had to sell on camera, and some of them are nervous or their lighting's not good. And so there's another opportunity that people needed what I had to offer. Having been interviewed on TV, I had some experience about that. So I would say be your own lifeguard and look for other opportunities that you might be qualified to fill based on your previous experiences.
That's fantastic. And I love that talk. And one of the things that I will never forget from it is you describing the learning zone.
Yes.
Tell us more about that, because that seems very relevant today.
Yes. Well, a lot of us get in the comfort zone. I like to drive to work the same way every day. I like to eat at a certain few restaurants. I like to do my job the same way. You're in a comfort zone. And unfortunately, that comfort zone doesn't just stay the same. If we're not pushing it and expanding it, it shrinks. So if we're not learning new skills and new ways of adapting, our world gets smaller and smaller, and we get less and less relevant. And that's the key to having invincibility in your career, is staying relevant. Whether it's learning blockchain or,
we're getting thrust out of our comfort zone, right? I mean, that's what a global pandemic does, or a hurricane, or a divorce, or, financial distress. It's not in our control.
Yes, so my goal is, instead of staying in your comfort zone, get into the learning zone. Now, I'm just as frustrated as most people are when someone says, oh, the pandemic, what a great time to learn a new language. I'm like, you know what? Let me just take a minute before I dive into having to prove myself as being super productive during this time. So I'm not saying the learning zone is something you have to jump right into out of the comfort zone, but certainly it is something to constantly look at and say, what can I learn about myself in this situation? Maybe I'm more resilient than I ever expected because I never got tested like this before.
Yes. Well, and so you've done that by reinventing your work and how you're of service to others who are all trying to do the same thing you are, which is, all the people that are your clients trying to get recognized, to known, and to make impact in a new way when we can't be face to face.
Yes. So back to what's a case story versus a case study. Now more than ever, storytelling is more important when you can't see people face-to-face, because if it's just on camera or in an email, you must tell a story to cut through the clutter and be memorable, because you can't read facial cues. I tell people you now need to be a shapeshifter, like the Matrix again, during this time, and who tells stories. Like, for example, I was working with one client, their medical device company, and they were saying, our equipment makes surgeries go 30% faster. And I said, well, that's a nice statistic, but there's no story. And so now the story is, imagine how happy Dr. Higgins is down at Long Beach Memorial 6 months ago, using our equipment, that he could go out to the patient's family in that waiting room. And if you've ever been in that situation, waiting for somebody you love to come out of surgery, you know every minute feels like an hour. And so when that doctor came out an hour earlier than expected because he was using our equipment and shared the good news that the scope showed no cancer, the family was elated. And the doctor said, wow, that's why I became a doctor, for moments like this. And now the rep tells that story to other doctors, who then see themselves in the story and then say, so that's why I became a doctor. I want your equipment too.
I love that story. I want it, whatever it is. But are there certain basic elements that we can kind of follow as a guideline to creating stories? I know you've got some courses coming up, and I want to hear about that. We'll make sure we talk about it. But what can we give in terms of how to create stories that are compelling as that one?
Well, most people tell me I don't have a story, or my stories just go on and ramble and don't have a point. They're not concise. So I've come up with a little structure to use, and we'll break down the story I said. The first step is you must have some kind of exposition. The who, what, where, when, much like a journalist. So you'll notice I gave details. We know I gave the doctor's name, the location of the hospital, and then it was 6 months ago. So we have a frame of reference of where we are. And then you must describe the problem in such a way that tugs at people's heartstrings, so they're going to want to open their purse strings. And the big aha is the more you describe a problem and show empathy, the more people think you have their solution. And you notice what I did in that story was I told a story within a story that pulled you in a little bit more. If you've ever been in that situation, so you're not just observing the story, you're like, ooh, I have been in that situation in a waiting room, or I know someone who was in that situation. So it makes the story that much more engaging because you're in it, feeling that pain of waiting. And then the solution is, he comes out an hour earlier. And then the real secret to any good story, Christine, is the resolution. What was life like after for that doctor, which is he got reminded of why he became a doctor in the first place. And that's really where people go, oh, that's me. I want that feeling again.
I want that feeling, right? I hope you were all taking notes, because this is rich and valuable stuff. It's actionable as well. And so, what is the key to get to being a welcome guest? Because when people are selling, we're all having to sell, like you said. We feel like we're annoying. We're sending yet another email or making another call.
Yes.
Some people are allergic to the cold call. How do we get through that to become invited?
Well, another little example story was I was working with some salespeople in the medical health care. And, before COVID,